The SANEF chairperson is currently on the podium waiting for CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe to take the podium in a bit.
On the media, but also the country as well, because we know the important role that the media plays in strengthening democracy and holding the powerful to account. And we also know that without a strong media, democracy withers. So it's important for us as we sit here today, as we meet here today, to take forward some of the discussions we've had, to find solutions that will make sure that we future-proof ourselves and that the media is sustainable going forward. Let me just recap just quickly what one of the things we've had to do over the past 2 years as the impact of COVID-19 hit us. We know that over 1,000 journalists and media workers lost their jobs in this country. And as SANEF, we set up the SANEF Media Relief Fund, and through donations from generous citizens and also corporate South Africans, we were able to disperse over 2 million to about 500 journalists for their sustenance. Those are journalists that had lost their jobs during that period. But because, colleagues, we know that that was not enough. And we believe in the sustainability of the media. And also because we know that we all believe in the proverb that we would rather give and teach the men to fish, rather. That is why this week we issued a tender calling out for tech companies to come on board and to help us build solutions, digital solutions for community media and small local media. Now, this is an important initiative, colleagues, because we cannot just sit back and lament what is happening in the industry, but we have to be proactive in trying to make sure that the various communities in the far-flung areas of this country continue to get representation in the media. So while we protect ourselves and look for solutions, we know that the challenges we face as the media in South Africa is no different from the challenges that is faced by other colleagues in the sister countries of the African continent. And so whatever solutions we come up with, as we sit throughout the day to talk about the state of the industry and what our industry will look like post-COVID, whatever solutions we come up with are solutions that can also be implanted, that we can share with other colleagues throughout the continent. So that is why it is important to us. It was important for us to invite our guest of honor today, and I'll tell you why. We know that over the past 2 years, most of us have been locked down. We have barely traveled. But at least for the past 15 months, our guest of honor has been traversing this African continent. He has been meeting with governments, with communities, and also with our colleagues in those various jurisdictions. So we thought it important that today we can invite him so that he can share his insights on the intersection between football and communities, stability in the African continent, but also the development of democracy in Africa. We know also that in the countries that he has been to, that he has interacted with some of our colleagues there. And perhaps he can share with us his views on the role of the media in strengthening peace and democracy in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to bore you with his CV because we know it's long and it's impressive, but safe to say that he is the founding chairman of African Rainbow Capital. He also sits in the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum. And in 2017, when Forbes magazine celebrated their 100 years, they named him as one of the most influential businessmen living in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think we could have found a better speaker than our guest of honor today. So that is why this morning we as SANEF have the honor of hosting the 7th President of the Confederation of African Football. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, please join me in welcoming Dr. Patrice Motsepe. President.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Your presentation is reminded me of one of the outstanding dreams of a young Patrice Motsepe. Many years ago, as a student at Wits University, I took my girlfriend who is now my wife, she was studying medicine, I was studying law, to Hillbrow for us to have a sandwich. And those were the times when, as a young student at Wits, going to Hillbrow was the ultimate experience. And whilst we were having this sandwich, I said to her, I absolutely love football, and one of my dreams is one day to own a football club. And I think she liked me too much, and she was very polite, because what she should have said is, you can't even pay for the sandwich and you've got these disproportionate dreams. Why I'm talking about that ambition that I had as a young boy, because listening to Sbu, he reminded me of one of the outstanding in the sense that it has not been completed, in fact it hasn't been implemented, was a dream to get involved in the media. It's been always a deep, deep passion, and something I was very excited about. And I think it's partly because people don't really realize, if you look at the history of Wits University, I think Anton is there. In the 80s when I was at Wits, and it's part of this, the great history of this country, and is what you represent. The editors, the media, the news, we still talk about press conferences. But this country has got such a proud, proud history of the... Anton, you remember the Rand Daily Mail? Yeah. And the Post of Pesit Kwaboza, The World. I grew up on Lifebuoy, you know, Kaiser Motaung, advertising Lifebuoy. But I just want to express my personal pride, and I think I know that I talk on behalf of millions and millions of South Africans, on the absolutely crucial and critical work that you're doing. Its importance cannot be overemphasized, and that's why it's such a huge honor and pleasure for me. I don't always address the media, and in fact there are people who do a better job than I do, and that's why the South African media complains that I give more time overseas. And I tell you, simply because, as I said, Lutkolo in CAF, but also in the businesses and in the philanthropy that I'm associated with, there are people who do a good job, and I come in either when there are big problems or when they think that there's something important to emphasize. So I just want to re-emphasize one of the best legacies we can leave for our children, one of the best legacies we can institute for future generations is this huge sense of independence, this huge sense of a media community that has always, Sbu spoke about keeping the government and those who are in power, including business, including those of us who are very important in business, that we consistently have to be, we've got to recognize that we've got a duty to account, we've got a duty to report, but more importantly, we live in a transparent society and a transparent country. So I'm going to raise a few points and make a few remarks. I don't like speeches. I was told I'm going to give an address. I don't like addresses. I think it's more conversational. So there are most probably 5 crucial points I want to make. And again, before I move away from the media, I just want to re-emphasize, in every democracy, you need democracy in the sense of regular elections, free speech, critically important. You also need a legislature, the executive, judiciary. The function of the judges and an independent judiciary is to consistently ensure that those other 2 organs of government behave in terms of the Constitution. Critically important is the duty of all of us. one of our primary objectives is to make this country, to improve the living conditions of all of our people, and the prime focus of that has to be on the poor. I always say that we sometimes put too much emphasis on government and say government can do this and government can improve living conditions. I've got no doubt they can do something about ESCOM, and they should do something about ESCOM. But we have to also recognize that there's a critical role that individual citizens play. And that's why the role of the media is important. But we need to have a balance. Because, and I'll give you a story. A week ago, I got into, there was a funeral of Kumkani King Strau in the Eastern Cape. So I then got on the plane and flew to East London and do what I always like, either drive but because I was late, I took a helicopter. And when you fly over these areas in the Eastern Cape, you see the creativity, the enthusiasm, the passion amongst our people to make a living. A very beautiful part of the country. And side by side with that, you look at what is in the media, which is correct about the corruption, state capture, joblessness, all of those issues that do not only have to be identified and highlighted, but the recognition that there's a huge sense of urgency in terms of what needs to be done there. So we go to this funeral of the king of the Amapondo nation. Our people are an optimistic people. Our nation is an optimistic nation. Our nation is an aspirational nation. We side by side, were talking and identifying the failures. You cannot succeed without identifying the failures. And not just identifying the failures of our new democracy, but what are we doing to fix it? And that's why the Zondo Commission and the need to take effective, accountable action is critically important. We have to send a message to all of us. You cannot be party to the commission of crime. You cannot be party to the commission of corruption and get away with it. And this is a crucial part of the success of every young democracy. Now, you ask yourself, what is the relationship between that and football? What is the relationship between that and rugby? Because you know that we're also involved in the Blue Bulls. We had to get involved in the Blue Bulls. Not just because I was born in Orlando, in Soweto, but we grew up in Pretoria. And then, of course, when I was 5 years old, I went to the Eastern Cape, to a mission school. And we played a lot of rugby there, but football is in my DNA. I mean, I grew up supporting clubs which I'd rather not mention because Mamelodi Sundowns was not around at that time. So the key issue for us is, when I got my doctorate at Wits, my wife is a proper doctor. She worked for it, and I'm the other one. I don't know, maybe they needed to give some recognition. But anyway, I didn't have to study for it. She studied for it. I studied as a lawyer. And when I gave that message at Wits University, it reminded me of a few days ago when I was in Kigali. I've spoken about how optimistic and aspirational people we are. I was in Kigali last week. I was in the Eastern Cape. A few days ago, I was in Kigali. In fact, I came back from Kigali yesterday. A meeting of the Commonwealth Heads of State. And there was a discussion of the sad, painful history of this great, great country where almost more than 1 million of our people lost their lives in issues of ethnicity. Nothing to do with black and white, but a lot to do with how our future and the future of our children and the future of our country is so much better enhanced by the diversity of culture, of languages, of races, and why we have to build on that. The Prime Minister of Singapore and various others, because Kigali and Rwanda is positioning itself as the Singapore of Africa. They're doing exceptional work. And you're asking about how the media is doing in Africa. I think part of our job, our duty, is to make sure that there's free and fair and independent media throughout the continent. It's the cornerstone of democracy, absolute cornerstone. But there's so much enthusiasm in Kigali. If you've got a distinction between rich people in a country and poor people, and the poor people have no hope, marginalized, excluded, it's only those who, and again, we have this obsession that we think that it is primarily a racial issue in South Africa. Even if all of us were green and there were no distinctions, of course we've got a big problem of apartheid and we've got to fix it. We have to fix it. We have to create a future for those who've been excluded. And we have to, in the process of creating this true democracy, where the opportunities and improvement in the living conditions of all of our people, part of that is to make sure that there's significant black involvement in the economy, in skills, and that's why we've played an important role on this partnership between black and white farmers. But we should recognize that even in a country where everybody is black, all of us are black. Or let me rather say all of us are green. Those who are wealthy and rich and successful have no future if they're not actively involved. For us in business, it is as important for me in the businesses that we are associated with that has to make profits. It's even more important that there's hope for the poor and the unemployed and the marginalized. And the excessive majority of whom are black people. And there's nothing wrong, there's no conflict between creating an inclusive, non-racial future, because that is critical. And that's why one of the reasons we went into the Blue Bulls, because rugby, and I'll talk about football, when Francois Pienaar was carrying the Rugby World Cup in 1994, Baswan, is it 1994? Yeah, 95. I went to Soweto that evening. You look like a blue bull, If you're not the blue bull, I wouldn't ask you. I think so. And that's why I went to the Stormers, I went to watch the Stormers visit the Blue Bulls. I wasn't very happy last week. But the point I'm making is that evening I went to Orlando because I had to go and visit the day that we won. I went to the stadium, and at night I had to go and see my aunt in Orlando. I saw thousands of women and mothers on the street dancing and singing. And I know, because I grew up in those environments, rugby has never been, that excitement is what we find when we play football. But it was a recognition of, this is about us as South Africans. And we have to emphasize those factors, those experiences that brings people together. Journalists should not give up on reporting the good. I wanted to buy the Sunday Times many, many years ago, determined. I don't know who's from the Sunday Times. And they said to me that there's no future. They said, you're going to lose money. What you are saying is critically important. They said, you are going to lose money, don't waste your time. The media industry is going down. I had long discussions. I'd rather not mention the people. We spent lots of discussions because it was again some of those. I think it's more than a personal ambition. It's a critical recognition. Just like you need independent judges, you cannot have a democracy without independent, credible, respectable judges. And we can be proud that the judges and the magistrates we have in this country are world-class, absolutely world-class. Side by side with it, you need an equally independent, respected, credible media. So, as I conclude on the media side, I am now keen, more keen than ever before, to see what does the future of this media industry entail. I was in Davos a few weeks ago, and this whole issue of how social media is impacting the sustainability. And sustainability means profitability of the media industry. So just like in any business, you've got to educate, you've got to invest, you've got to attract the smartest, brightest journalists, but you've also got to pay them well. I mean, this statistic you gave me about 1,000 journalists losing their jobs means that that all of us have a deep sense of urgency. And I want to conclude by saying that in that regard, that I've got no doubt that all of us will continue to make a contribution. And I'm told that journalists are well paid. I've never come across employees who are well paid. You know, when I got into the mining industry in 1995, I had a mass meeting with many workers. It was one of my first mass meetings. And the management were complaining because I said, I want a mass meeting where I will talk, and after talking, I want them to ask, the workers to ask whatever questions they want, because it's an exceptional learning experience for me. And I think it was about 10,000 employees. In fact, the mines were being closed, and we had to give them a guarantee that we were not only going to keep those mines open, but that they would have a job for the long term. And the leader of the mine workers was sitting next to me, and an employee came to me and said to me, we just want to tell you that we are well paid. And the president of the workers heard him. He says, I can't tell you what he said, but he said, this one is talking absolute nonsense, you know. You are never in an industry where, in fact, let me put it this way. For us in business, we know that even when we pay the employees we've got the privilege to work with competitively. You've got to keep competing and keep, the best people don't have to work for you, you lose them. And if anybody says it's about my job, I love my job, and it's wonderful, but it's also about the pay. It's everything. It's job fulfillment, growth, future, excitement, respect, but it's also about competitive salaries and pay. Now, let's go to the boring part, football. And I think I spoke about rugby. You have to look at the role of football in the context of its critical socio-economic role in education, in economic growth, economic development, improvement of people's standards of living. I've just mentioned this example of how when Francois Pienaar when he was carrying the World Cup in 1995, hundreds and thousands of people in our country. They didn't say Francois Pienaar, the white captain. They didn't say Neil Tovey, who carried the AFCON, African Nations Cup. They didn't look at Neil Tovey and say Neil Tovey, the white captain. In those moments, it was about all of us being South African, created in the image of God. And the beauty and the fulfillment and the excitement that we succeed together, we grow together. And what enriches us is this multicultural, multiracial, multilingual background that all of us have. And, and whenever I mention that, I always emphasize that keep the focus where it has to be. And the primary focus has to be on the poor. It has to be on the marginalized. It has to be on the disadvantaged, because those poor black communities, rural communities, traditional communities, the ones that I saw when we flew over in the helicopter, if we don't give a future to them, all of us do not have a future. Now football, they came to me and said to me, I must consider becoming president of football in Africa, and they said, you will spend less than 5% of your time. And I said, more than anything, I'm enjoying philanthropy. Philanthropy is taking most of my time, because it emphasizes that our role in business cannot only be about making money and profitability, as important as that is. That's critically important. It also has to be about education, job creation, socio-economic upliftment, and all of the projects, putting black and white farmers together, the work we do with religious organizations, critically important. And that's why, as the Motsepe Foundation, we gave $10 million for schools football on the African continent. Because, again, another example, rugby. We won the Rugby World Cup 3 times, South Africa. And I think the main reason is because in the rugby community, they've invested in rugby schools competitions, the Craven Week and many others. And that's why in football, because that's one of the critical areas where I have a huge obligation. We sponsor about 8,000 schools in South Africa that participates in the K Motsepe schools football. And of course, we also support the amateur football. But football has a unique role in bringing a sense of national pride. Now, Bafana Bafana, let me say, Banyana Banyana are doing better than the other one. And we're very proud of them. And I always tell Danny, one of my sad moments is, as the president of CAF, I've got to tell every nation in Africa, you've got to win, because one of my objectives is an African nation must win the World Cup, and an African nation will win the World Cup in the not too distant future. The talent, the skills are there. Part of what we need to do is to invest in schools football on the African continent. So I'm standing there talking about how critically important it is that every country, football at club level becomes globally competitive in Africa, and their nations become the best. And my own nation, South Africa, I think I must talk to Sia Kolisi and say, Sia, you've made us proud, the football people, because football by far is the most popular sport. I mean, when I said to my wife I want to own a football club, it's not only because I was obsessed. I loved football and continue to love football, but it's also because it's a powerful tool to put us in touch with our ordinary people. One day Sundowns was playing Chiefs in the Telkom Cup, and I did a mistake by, at halftime, walking to the bathrooms via the Chiefs crowd. I don't know how I got there. And they stopped and looked at me and said, this, they said it in the local, you see this club of yours called Sundowns, we don't like it at all. Asifuni le club, siyayizonda. But they say, kodwa wena ngcono wena. You are not too bad. So football puts us in touch with our ordinary people, and I'm very confident that we will succeed. We want more young white South Africans, Afrikaner South Africans, Jewish South Africans, English South Africans, because our focus is football in the rural areas too, and the talent in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape and Limpopo is exceptional. Colored South Africans, Indian South Africans, football is very unique, and it's a sense of dignity, gives a sense of pride. And in Davos, the question was asked, what is the role of football in the green economy? Because there are most probably 3 topics in the world that are crucial. Number one is, in no order of priority, it's climate change. And then, of course, right now you've got the Ukraine, Russia issue, which has a global impact not only on inflation, but also on the global economies. And then, of course, the other issue is this cryptocurrency, technology. But we see football. That's one of the reasons why I got into football. And that's one of the reasons why when I visit every country in Africa, you know, it's an incredible learning experience. During the Cameroon Champions Cup, it took me 3 hours to travel from my hotel to the stadium, which should have taken me 15 minutes, because the roads were just, and the army, I had a police escort. They were making all of the noise that people just ignore them and said, you know, when it comes to football, the brain doesn't work. If they tell you, give way, I'm going to arrest you, and they think, maybe you should arrest me after the game. But I want to say, what really, in the midst of my total frustration sitting in the car with tens of thousands of people around all of us, and there was 100,000 people outside the stadium. But the positive part was, as I was driving to the stadium, you know, I got insight into the houses where the people were watching TV on the game that already started. And it just exposed me that the total passion, the absolute passion, and the excitement, and the role that football plays in their lives. And that's why we've always argued that we should, we should use football to educate our young people to say, one of the biggest messages in football is against racism, which is very, very important. We should continue to use football and say football is against corruption. Football is against crime. Football, the issue that we are talking about now is football supports the green economy. Football supports initiatives to counter climate change. Anyway, I thought I said more than I was going to, because the exciting part is the part that's now going to follow when the media has to ask me all of the embarrassing questions. And this is what a democracy and a society is all about, that you have to keep probing. You know, I said I studied as a lawyer, and one of the top professors at Wits said to me, we train you to be pessimistic, we train you to be skeptical, we train you to ask all the questions that are uncomfortable and makes people realize that they've got a duty to not only to be transparent, but a duty to fairness and justice. And I think that's also part of the crucial role that all of you play, and the crucial role that the media plays. I want to thank all of you and just conclude by saying, side by side with all of the crucial negative failures of all of us and of the country and of the economy, we also have to emphasize that as South Africans, we are an optimistic people. As South Africans, we are an aspirational nation. We overcame apartheid, and we were told that there will never be democracy in this country without hundreds of thousands of people dying. And many people did lose their lives leading up to democracy. But what gives me hope always, and what gives me reason to continue making a humble contribution, because none of us can do it on its own. All of us have a unique opportunity. We should not lose hope, even in the darkest moments of our country. And we are going through a very difficult time now. And we should not fool ourselves by not identifying the failures that we are going through now and the problems that we have. But more importantly, let's uphold the inspiration and the encouragement and the motivation, because we've succeeded against all odds in the past, and we will succeed against all odds in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, President. Thank you.
Well, that was the CAF President Patrice Motsepe addressing the South African National Editors Forum AGM in Johannesburg, and he did mention that the best legacy to leave behind for the younger generation, of course, is to ensure that they understand independence and freedom and keep the government in check. And perhaps what is key in what he said is that football should be used as a catalyst to fight, in as much as football is used to fight racism, it should also be a catalyst to fight corruption. Well, he just ended his address, and that will signal the start of the SANEF AGM.